Gentiles versus Jews. Who were the Gentiles? Historically, the book Slavery as it Relates to the Negro or African Race, examined in the light of circumstances, history, and the Holy Scriptures, with an account of the origin of the black man's color, causes of his state of servitude, and traces of his character, as well in ancient as in modern times, with strictures on abolitionism by Josiah Priest, published 1849. As at 1849, in the time of St. Paul, the term Gentile, as in the days of the Noah, see Genesis 10:5, referred to the nations of the white race, as it is written by the apostle in several of his letters to the churches, that he was the apostle of the Gentiles. See snapshot of page in next slide. Paragraph 2 here says, in the time of St. Paul, the term Gentile, as in the days of Noah, see Genesis 10:5, referred to the nations of the white race, as it is written by the apostle in several of his letters to the churches, that he was the apostle of the Gentiles. Can it be shown that Paul ever preached to a Negro people at all? If not, then it follows that the word Gentiles still referred to white men in his time as to Greeks, Romans, Gauls, Italians, Spaniards, and other nations of the north, but never to the Negro race. Jews simply meant people of the tribe of Judah. Hebrews were the chosen people enslaved in Egypt, and that includes all the 12 tribes of Israel. Exodus 5:3, they answered, and that was Moses and Aaron, the God of the Hebrews has met with us. How then did the Hebrews come to be narrowed to Jews? And today the white race, who were Gentiles, are now both Jews and Gentiles. Please watch the next clip to understand how the Gentiles were grafted in. Shalom.
All right. Shalom to all the viewers out there. And we praise the Most High for allowing us to come together to go through another message. The subject that we're going to touch on today is the topic of the Gentiles being grafted in. A lot of you Gentiles out there are going to learn something today in this lesson. And it's called chronology. You're going to learn chronological order on how the Gentiles got grafted in. You're going to learn 3 things today in this message. You're going to learn when, in correct chronological order, the Gentiles were afforded the chance to get grafted in. You're going to learn why the Gentiles were grafted in, and you're going to learn how the Gentiles were grafted in, because a lot of you don't have any understanding on any of that. A lot of you don't have any correct chronological order understanding on this subject. So that's what you're going to learn today. So you need to grab your pen, your paper, close your lips, sit down and just learn. Because the Christian church is not going to teach you anything, so you might as well just sit back with your pen and paper and just listen and learn. I'm Brother Yerachim. This is the Bible Unlocked, the Gentiles grafted in. Zondervan Bible Dictionary. Gentiles. Usually it means a non-Israelite people. Gentile, that's the first thing we're going to start out. The definition of Gentile. It usually means a non-Israelite people. That means 9 out of 10 times when you see the word Gentile, it's talking about someone who is not an Israelite. That's what it's referring to. And it says usually because there are some exceptions where the term Gentile can mean an Israelite. There are a few exceptions, which we'll go through in other lessons. But usually, meaning most of the time, the word Gentile means a non-Israelite person. So now that we have that understanding of what a Gentile means, the definition of it, let's go into the scriptures, and I want to clear one thing up first. Because a lot of you out there believe that when Christ jumped on the scene, that he was had some big melting pot of different races around him and different nationalities, and that everybody was just coming along and holding hands and kumbayan. That's what a lot of you have the misconception on. And I'm going to show you first that Christ, when he was on the scene, was not dealing with Gentiles. He was not, his mission primarily when he was on earth was not for Gentiles. It was for his own people. It was for the 12 tribes of Israel. So I want to clear this up first before we find out how the Gentiles came into the fold. Matthew 15 verse 24. But he answered and said, I am not sent but unto the lost sheep of the house of Israel. The Messiah said that he was not sent but unto the lost sheep of the house of Israel. This was a Syrophoenician, or a Greek woman, came beseeching him for him to heal her daughter. And he says, I'm not sent but only to my own people. That's what he said. When he's on earth, that was his response. I'm not sent but only to my own people at this particular time. So eventually, when you continue reading down in the chapter, he did eventually give this lady her request, but this is after she had to endure lines of disrespect. He called the lady a dog. He said it's not meet to take the children's bread and cast it to the dogs. But even after all that, she still had humility and was humble enough to still sit there and acknowledge, like, you know, okay, that's no problem, but I still need the blessing. So eventually he did give this lady her request. But that don't take away from what he just said. He said, I'm not sent but unto the lost sheep of the house of Israel. That was his mission. Let's get some more. Matthew chapter 10 verse 5. These 12 Jesus sent forth and commanded them, saying, Go not into the way of the Gentiles, and into any city of the Samaritans enter ye not, but go rather to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. These 12 Christ commanded. He didn't give a suggestion. He commanded. You know what happens like when your mom tells you to do something? That's a command. When your dad tells you to do something, that's a command. When the police officers tell you to do something, that's a command. Christ commanded his 12 disciples and said, don't go preaching to the Gentiles. He says, don't go preaching to the Gentiles, but rather to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. Now, why is Christ saying that? Because when he was on earth, his mission was primarily for his own people. That's what you're going to read when you go through the scriptures. It was for his own people. The Gentiles were not in mention when Christ was on the scene, as you're going to find out even more as we continue going through this lesson. Christ was dealing with his own people. Now, let's get the Christian scholars, your Christian scholars, let's see if they have the same interpretation when they go through the scriptures, or if they're lying to you in the Christian church. Let's find out if I'm just making this up, or if my interpretation is incorrect. And let's go to the Christian scholars and find out what they say. Zondervan Bible Dictionary. Gentiles. While the teaching of Jesus ultimately broke down the middle wall of partition between Jews and Gentile, as it is seen in the writings of Paul and in Acts, yet Jesus limited his ministry to Jews. He limited the ministry to the Israelites. As we just went over the scriptures, I am not sent but unto the lost sheep of the house of Israel. He limited his ministry to the Jews, because you're not going to read in the scriptures Christ going out and preaching to the Gentiles. You're not going to read about Christ going out to Asia and preaching to the Asians. You're not going to read about Christ going to Europe and preaching to the Europeans, or to Africa preaching to the Africans. You're not going to read that in the scriptures. You're going to read him staying in the land of Israel amongst his own people. That's what you're going to read. With rare exceptions, Samaritan, John 4 verse 1 through 42, the Syrophoenician woman, the Greeks in John, he instructed his 12 disciples, go not into the way of the Gentiles. Now, this is what the Christian scholars know. A lot of you get upset when this information comes out, but that's not my problem. You shouldn't be upset with me for bringing out the information. You need to be upset with these people who's bringing out the information. That's what you need to be upset with. The Christian scholars and the Christian organization, while they're sitting there in church teaching you one thing about some made up Christ that don't exist in the Bible, and then they're going behind your back scribbling in the books writing the correct information in the books. That's what they're doing. Telling you a false doctrine and then going behind and writing the real information in the books. Because they know they can teach you anything in the Christian church, and you're just gonna absorb it all. You're gonna swallow it and eat everything that they tell you in there. So they know the people in the Christian church, they can feed you anything. But they know the people who actually gonna buy the dictionaries, they know these people actually read. These people actually ask questions. These people actually have an independent thought, unlike the Christian church. So they know that they have to write the correct information to the best of their ability inside of these dictionaries. So that's who you need to be upset with, the people that's going behind your back doing this stuff, because they know, they've read and studied these scriptures to a T. So they know what's in this Bible. But they're going to tell you something different in the Christian church, because it's all psychology and mind control. All psychology and mind control. That's what it is. Now, with that being said, let's go into the account where the Gentiles first were able to get grafted in. You're going to find out that this didn't happen until Acts the 10th chapter, after the death of Christ. This is what I said, you're going to get correct chronology. So now we have Christ, who's saying he's not dealing with Gentiles. Now we're going to go to Acts the 10th chapter with Cornelius. This is the first time that the Gentile was able to get grafted in, with Cornelius in Acts the 10th chapter. Acts is after the Gospels, to all you that don't know. This Acts is after Christ's death and ascension up into the heavens. Let's go and get the account from Peter, who was the head apostle under Christ. Acts chapter 10, verse 28. And he said unto them, Ye know how it is an unlawful thing for a man that is a Jew to keep company or come unto one of another nation. This is Peter speaking, the head apostle under Christ. He says, you know, you Gentiles know that it is an unlawful thing for a man that is a Jew to be keeping company with you Gentiles. He says, you know this already. And Peter's saying it because Christ never taught them about keeping company with Gentiles, even when Christ was on the scene. That's why Peter's having this revelation in Acts the 10th chapter. That's the whole purpose behind Acts the 10th chapter. He says, you know it's unlawful for us to be keeping company with you. You know this. And Christ never taught them anything else other than that, until the Most High came and showed him what he's about to say next. But God hath showed me that I should not call any man common or unclean. Now, why did the Most High have to show Peter? Because Christ was on the scene and Christ never taught Peter that. So the Most High had to come after Christ, his death, and show Peter in a vision. And Peter was doubting this vision. Peter was doubting this vision when he was seeing it. But then he realized, okay, the Most High is showing me that I don't have to call the Gentiles common or unclean. This is the beginning of the Gentiles being grafted in, not when Christ was on the scene. Because if the Gentiles were grafted in when Christ was on the scene, there would be no need for Acts the 10th chapter. There would be no need for Cornelius. There would be no need for any of that. But that's the whole purpose behind Cornelius. Now, from here, Acts the 10th chapter, now we're going to go into Paul, the apostle of the Gentiles, and he's going to explain to a T how the Gentiles were grafted in and why the Gentiles were grafted in. That's what he's going to explain. So now we know when the Gentiles were grafted in, after the death of Christ, when Peter received the revelation. It was Cornelius. Nothing to do with Christ or anything that happened during the time of Christ. A lot of you got upset with the John 3:16 video. None of that has to do with Gentiles. The God so loved the world was talking about the world of Israel. That's what it was referring to. Christ wasn't dealing with Gentiles when he was on the scene. It's nothing hard to be understood. There's nothing hard about that to be understood. A lot of you got upset with the John 3:16 video. It has nothing. 90% of Christ, 90% of his parables, of his speeches, had nothing to do with Gentiles. Nothing to do with Gentiles at all. All of it had to do with the children of Israel. 90% of his parables, 90% of the people he was healing, Israelites. His ministry was for his own people. So now let's go find out from Paul how the Gentiles were grafted in and why they were grafted in. That's what we're going to find out now. Romans 11 verse 1. I say then, have God cast away his people? God forbid. For I also am an Israelite of the seed of Abraham, of the tribe of Benjamin. That's what Paul's asking. Has God cast away his people? God forbid. That means no. Who are his people? The Israelites, as Paul just said. God has not cast away his people like the Christian church would love to make you believe, that the Israelites are done away with and everyone else is just in the fold and the Most High just cast away the Israelites. Paul says, God forbid. Israelites are not cast away. Romans 11 verse 11. I say then, have they stumbled that they should fall? Who's the they? Context, verse 1, the Israelites, all 12 tribes of Israel. Have they, meaning the Israelites, stumbled that they should fall? God forbid. That means no, the Israelites didn't stumble so bad that they would fall and not be able to get back up. That's what Paul's saying. But rather through their fall, salvation is come unto the Gentiles. This is how the Gentiles were able to get grafted in. Rather through the Israelites' fall, salvation was extended to the Gentiles. This is how the Gentiles were able to get grafted in. Not from Christ dying on the cross or anything else. Paul's telling you firsthand how the Gentiles are able to get grafted in. Paul, the apostle to the Gentiles, is letting you know exactly how you got grafted in. I can care less about what the Christian pastor says, what you think, what any philosopher out there says. No one can tell it better than Paul, who is the apostle to the Gentiles. No one can give a better explanation than Paul himself. Paul's letting you know how you got grafted in. And now he's about to tell you one of the reasons why you got grafted in, because there's two reasons why the Gentiles got grafted in. Paul's about to tell you the first one. For to provoke them to jealousy. For to provoke the Israelites to jealousy. This is one of the reasons why the Gentiles got grafted in. This is a prophecy being fulfilled, written all the way in Deuteronomy, which, of course, you wouldn't know about it because you don't study the Old Testament. Of course, you wouldn't know. You wouldn't know what's going on right now. That prophecy was being fulfilled at this time. So there's a prophecy that we're getting ready to go to that says that the Most High said he would use the Gentile nations to provoke the children of Israel to jealousy if we didn't keep his commandments. And now Paul's letting you know that this prophecy is coming to pass. So let's go to the prophecy to find out what's happening right now in Romans 11. Deuteronomy 32 verse 21. They have moved me to jealousy with that which is not God. They have provoked me to anger with their vanities, and I will move them to jealousy with those which are not a people. I will provoke them to anger with a foolish nation. Because we provoke the Most High to anger and jealousy with our vanities, the Most High says, you know what? I'm going to do the same thing to you. I'm going to provoke you to anger and jealousy with a foolish nation. Someone that's not my people. Someone that's not God, that's not God's people. Now, let's find out who this is talking to, because there's some brothers out there that's going to say that this is talking about the southern or the northern kingdom provoking the southern kingdom to jealousy, when this is not what that's talking about. This is talking about Gentile nations provoking the children of Israel to jealousy. Let's go to the first chapter and find out who Moses was speaking to when this prophecy was being revealed. If he was speaking to just the southern kingdom, or was it all 12 tribes of Israel standing here when this prophecy came to, was being brought out? Deuteronomy 1 verse 1. These be the words which Moses spake unto all Israel on this side Jordan in the wilderness. So the Most High was speaking to all 12 tribes of Israel through Moses when he brought out the prophecy that he would provoke the 12 tribes of Israel to jealousy with a foolish nation and those that are not a people. So that's what it's referring to. The Gentiles provoking the nation of Israel to jealousy. Now, let's get some more from Paul about the Gentiles being grafted in. Romans 11 verse 13. For I speak to you Gentiles, inasmuch as I am the apostle of the Gentiles, I magnify mine office. If by any means I may provoke to emulation them which are my flesh, and might save some of them. Paul says, I'm speaking to you Gentiles. And I'm letting you know that by any means, I'm doing what I have to do if I may provoke some of them to jealousy, which are my flesh. He says, even if it has to do with grafting you in and preaching the word to you, I'm doing what I have to do in order to bring my flesh and blood back into the fold. Now let's find out who Paul's flesh is according to Paul himself. Let's find out who his flesh is. Romans 9 verse 3. For I could wish that myself were accursed from Christ for my brethren, my kinsmen according to the flesh, who are Israelites. He's talking about all 12 tribes of Israel, northern and southern kingdom. That's his flesh. Who are Israelites? So that's who he's trying to provoke back, provoke to jealousy, so he might save some of them. That's what Paul was doing and using the Gentiles for, to provoke to jealousy the 12 tribes of Israel so he can bring them back to the fold and save some of them if it may be possible. So now we know the first reason why the Gentiles were grafted into the fold. And it was to provoke the nation of Israel to jealousy, so that some of them, when the jealousy came on them, that they would come back to the Most High. Now let's find out the second reason why the Gentiles got grafted in, because there's another reason why the Gentiles are able to get grafted into the fold. Watch. Acts chapter 15 verse 14. Simeon hath declared how God at the first did visit the Gentiles to take out of them a people for his name. Simeon is also aka Peter. Simeon says that the Most High did at first visit the Gentiles to take out of them a people for his name. When did it start? In Acts the 10th chapter with Cornelius. That's when the Most High visited the Gentiles, not during the time of Christ. In Acts the 10th chapter with Cornelius. That's when the Most High visited the Gentiles. And to this agree the words of the prophets, as it is written. And now Simeon's about to quote something as it is written, something in the Old Testament he's making a reference to, and we're going to get that in a second. After this I will return and will build again the tabernacle of David, which is fallen down, and I will build again the ruins thereof, and will set it up, that the residue of men might seek after the Lord, and all the Gentiles upon whom my name is called, saith the Lord, who doeth all these things. Now, Simeon just paraphrased a prophecy from the Old Testament. Now we're going to go to the exact prophecy that he was paraphrasing, so we can get the full understanding on what Peter was referring to, or what Simeon was referring to. Let's go to the Old Testament account, because he said, as it is written. So let's go to where it's written to find out what Simeon was referring to. Amos 9 verse 11. In that day will I raise up the tabernacle of David that is fallen, and close up the breaches thereof. And I will raise up his ruins, and I will build it as the days of old. The same thing we read already in Acts 15. It's the same exact thing. So let's continue going on. That they may possess the remnant of Edom, and all the heathen which are called by my name, saith the Lord that doeth this. You're going to find out that the Most High is taking those from the Gentile nations to be a possession for the nation of Israel in the kingdom of heaven. Let me say it again. The Most High is taking among the heathen, or among the Gentiles, a select amount of people to graft into the fold in order to be servants and handmaids in the kingdom of heaven. A lot of you don't want to accept that, but that's not my problem. A lot of you don't want to accept that. That's what Peter and Simeon was quoting. The Most High visited the Gentiles to take out of them a people for his name, and these select Gentiles would be a possession, or servants and handmaids in the kingdom of heaven. Now I'll do a video on it, what it means to be a servant and a handmaid, but you're going to find out that the ones, the Gentiles that make it into the kingdom, they're going to willingly serve. They're going to have no problem to serve, just like the Syrophoenician woman that was begging Christ, and after he called her a dog and said it's not meet to take the children's bread and cast it to the dogs, she still was like, okay, I accept that. And then he blessed her. They're going to be people like that, like Cornelius, like Ruth. There's going to be people that's willing to serve. And it's not talking about whipping and chains and all that. That's not what it's referring to when it says, when it's being a possession or servants and handmaids. I'll do a video on that to give a full explanation. But those people that make it into the kingdom, the Gentiles that make it to the kingdom, are going to have a problem serving the children of Israel, because it's going to be in righteousness. That's what's going on right now with the Gentiles being grafted in. That's what the whole ordeal is about. Not everybody holding hands and kumbaya and everybody just whole big rainbow family. That's not what it's dealing with. It's dealing with a social a structure in the kingdom of heaven that's going to be set up. You can't have a kingdom without rulers and subjects. The scriptures tell you that there are going to be 12,000 from each tribe in Revelation 7. From each tribe, that's going to be rulers over the next kingdom. Well, who they're going to be ruling over? They're going to be ruling over the air or what? Ruling over frogs and cats? They got to have somebody to rule over. You can't have a kingdom without the rulers and subjects. See, but the problem is, that's why in the future videos, most of the Gentiles, you're not going to make it to the kingdom anyway, because you're too proud and stubborn to be able to accept the position that the Most High has appointed for you. And a lot of you ask all the time, I get a lot of comments from you, well, do you think that's fair that the Gentiles have to serve the Israelites? Do you think? Well, it's not my problem. It's not my position to say if it's fair or not. It just said the Most High that doeth this, not Brother Yerushalayim that doeth this. The Most High that doeth this. So what I think or what I feel don't have nothing. That's irrelevant. That's irrelevant. How I feel about the situation is irrelevant. That's not my job. My job is just to show you what the scriptures say, to the best of my ability. Bring out the scriptures and then give you the full breakdown and understanding of it. So don't ask me no questions about how I feel and do you think it's fair. I don't want to hear any of that, because that's not my job. I'm not the Most High. I can only tell you what He says and what the outcome is going to be at the end. So this is another reason why the Gentiles were grafted in, to be servants and handmaids in the kingdom of heaven. Romans 11 verse 17. And if some of the branches be broken off, and if some of the branches were broken off, let's find out who these branches are referring to. See, Paul right now is giving an analogy of an olive tree. And the olive tree, we're going to find out that it represents the 12 tribes of Israel. So let's find out what prophecy Paul is quoting from in order to get the understanding on what he's breaking down right now. Jeremiah 11 verse 16. The Lord called thy name a green olive tree, fair and of goodly fruit. With the noise of a great tumult, he hath kindled fire upon it, and the branches of it are broken. The branches of it are broken. This is the same thing that Paul is referring to. Now we're going to find out who were the branches that were broken off. That's what we're going to find out as we continue reading. For the Lord of hosts that planted thee hath pronounced evil against thee, for the evil of the house of Israel and of the house of Judah, which they have done against himself, to provoke me to anger in offering incense unto Baal. The branches that were broken off were both northern and southern kingdom, Israel and Judah. A lot of people are breaking this down incorrectly, saying that the branches that were broken off were the scribes and Pharisees and just the southern kingdom. Both northern and southern kingdom Israelites were broken off of the olive tree. That's what Paul is referring to right now. Through unbelief and worshiping the Gentile gods, Baal and Beelzebub and all those satanic gods, that's how we were broken off. The branches were nipped off. Now let's go back to the account with Paul and finish breaking down what he's going through. Romans 11 verse 17. And if some of the branches be broken off, the sum of the branches, as we just read in Jeremiah, was the northern and southern kingdom, Israel and Judah, the two kingdoms that split. And thou being a wild olive tree, and thou, who's the thou? Thou, that's referring to the natural Gentiles. And thou, you Gentiles, being a wild olive tree, because Israel is a good olive tree. The 12 tribes of Israel is a good olive tree, But thou, you Gentiles, you're a wild olive tree, were grafted in among them, and with them partakers of the root and fatness of the olive tree. And thou were grafted in amongst the good olive tree from the wild olive tree, and then partakers of the root and fatness, meaning the blessings, the covenant of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. There's going to be some Gentiles out there that are going to serve the Most High in righteousness and going to be partakers of the blessings that come with being in this good olive tree. There's going to be some Gentiles out there that do that. This is not talking about all Gentiles that are the wild olive tree. Some Gentiles are going to break off of that and come to the good olive tree and worship the Most High and exclude paganism, like the Christian church, the Christmas and Easter. They're going to exclude all that, and they're going to be partakers of the root and fatness. Romans 11 verse 24. For if thou were cut out of the olive tree, which is wild by nature, if thou, you Gentiles, natural Gentiles, were cut out of the wild olive tree, which is wild by nature. What does that mean? In the beginning, when you read in Deuteronomy 4 verse 16, the Most High took the nation of Israel out as an inheritance to worship him. But he took the Gentile nations and he gave you the sun, the stars, the moon, the dragons, snails, lizards, fowls of the air, monkeys. He gave you all that stuff to worship. That's what it tells you. He gave you all the host of heaven to worship. But he took the Israelites out to worship him. So you're naturally wild. It's natural for you Gentiles out there to teach paganism. It's natural. That's why he's calling you the wild branch by nature. You're the wild olive tree by nature. It's natural for you to worship Satan and worship paganism, or worship and do paganistic rituals. It's natural for you to do that. That's why when the Gentiles got grafted in, it didn't take nothing but 100, 200 years later after Christ for you to pervert the entire doctrine of Christianity, or the entire gospel and the entire word. It didn't take long for you, because it's natural for you to do that. That's what Paul is breaking down right now. And all the 90% of the comments I get about we don't have to keep no commandments, guess who it comes from? The Gentiles. Because I got to remember sometimes, you know what, they're the naturally wild branches. So it's natural for you to not want to keep any commandments, and it's natural for you to gravitate towards homosexuality and bestiality. It's natural for a lot of you guys to do that. And gay marriages, it's natural for you to do that and not keep none of God's commandments. So I have to remind myself sometimes when I see those. I rarely see Israelites, whether they know they're Israelites or not, come on the channel and say, we don't have to keep no commandments. I rarely see that. And were grafted contrary to nature into a good olive tree, and you were grafted contrary to nature. Because the natural, like I said, naturally, your tendency is to go and worship Satan. The proof is in the pudding. Look at the Christian doctrine now, after the Gentiles taking it over. Now you're doing Christmas, you're doing Easter, you're doing Halloween, you're doing Sunday worship. You ain't keeping no commandments. You're doing everything that you used to do before you got grafted in. That's what the majority of the Gentiles out there are doing. You're doing all the same rituals that your forefathers did before you were grafted in. All you did was take the Bible and mask it over. That's all you did. Naturally, you're grafted in contrary to nature. That means the ones of you that get grafted in, you're going to have to cut off those ties. You're going to have to cut off all those dealings that your forefathers dealt with. All that pagan Christianity, all that Satan worship. You're going to have to cut all that out. And that's why it's going to be just as hard for the Gentiles to get into the kingdom as it is for the Israelites. Because you're going to have to cut off what's natural to you. It's natural for you to deal with horoscopes and zodiac signs. It's natural for you to be dealing with that stuff. And looking in the stars and creating gods and stuff out of it, and Mother Nature and Father Time. That stuff is natural for you. You introduce that stuff to the world. So that's natural. So it's going to be hard for you to cut those ties off. You got to cut that off and come into the good branch, which means worshiping the Most High in righteousness, keeping His commandments, and having no other gods. That's going to be hard for a lot of Gentiles to do. Hard for a lot of Gentiles to do. How much more shall these which be the natural branches, be grafted into their own olive tree. Paul is saying, if the Most High took you out of the wild olive tree from worshiping Satan and Baal and all those other pagan deities, if he was able to graft you out of the wild olive tree and bring you into the good olive tree, how much more is he able to take the natural branches and bring them back and graft them in again? Meaning the Israelites are not going to be cut off and not be able to come back into their own olive tree, because we're the natural branches. We're the natural branches. So we can get grafted back into our own olive tree. See, it takes a lot more science and work to chop off a wild olive tree and graft it into a totally different olive tree. But the natural branches, we're able to come right back into our own fold with no problem. The Most High is accepting all Israelites that's willing to come back and repent, even though it's only going to be a remnant that shall be saved. A remnant of Israelites going to be saved. That's it. For I would not, brethren, that ye should be ignorant of this mystery, lest ye should be wise in your own conceits. Paul says, don't be ignorant, you Gentiles, lest you be puffed up with pride. That's what he's telling the Gentiles, who's thinking that the Israelites just got cut off and now they're grafted in, and the Israelites can't come back into the fold. That blindness in part is happened to Israel until the fullness of the Gentiles be come in. Until the fullness of the Gentiles be come into the fold. That's what it's referring to. Until the fullness, the designated amount of Gentiles come into the fold, because there's only a certain amount of slots on this olive tree. You have an olive tree there, and it's only a certain amount of slots on it. So you have Israelites that are broken off of it, because at one time the olive tree was only Israelites. That's all that was the olive tree was for. You have the whole olive tree with a certain amount of branches on it and a certain amount of slots or stems. So the Israelites were chopped off of the olive tree, and now there's a certain amount of slots that are left still. There's a certain amount of stems left on this olive tree. So there's a certain amount of stems to be filled. So the Most High is grafting in from the wild olive tree enough to be able to fulfill or fill in those gaps. Because there's only going to be a remnant of Israel that returns back to this olive tree. Only a remnant that's going to return back. And he's going to fill in the rest of the olive tree with the Gentiles, which are going to be servants and handmaids in the kingdom of heaven. That's what it's going to be. Going to be servants and handmaids in the kingdom of heaven. So by default, there's going to be more Gentiles than there is Israelites, because only a remnant of Israel is going to be saved. And it tells you in Amos the 9th chapter, only a remnant, or there's going to be a remnant of Edomites that make it, and there's going to be an amount of the other nations that make it as well. But the Edomites, who are the so-called Caucasians, there's only going to be a remnant of you that make it. Only a small amount. We'll get into that in further lessons. Only a small amount of you going to make it. That's it. Because you're going to stick to that wild olive tree. You're going to stick to the paganism. You're going to stick to that. And only a small amount of you are going to break off from that, your pagan ancestry, and going to come to the good olive tree. And so all Israel shall be saved, as it is written, there shall come out of Zion the deliverer, and shall turn away ungodliness from Jacob. So all Israel is going to be saved when it's all said and done. All 12 tribes, the elect from the 12 tribes of Israel, all 12 tribes are going to be saved. Because in the verse 1, the subject was, did God cast away his people? And the answer was no. So at the end of everything, the Gentiles being come into the fold, the fullness of the Gentiles be come in, at the end of the day, all 12 tribes of Israel are still going to be saved. So now we have a clear understanding on chronology of regarding the Gentiles. Now we know when, how, and why the Gentiles were grafted into the fold. Now we have a clear understanding, because a lot of you have been misinformed on this information. When this is something so basic, as long as you don't have a preconceived notion in the back of your mind and have an agenda, it's very easy to find out the Gentiles' position as far as the Most High and with the children of Israel. It's very easy to find that out. It's not rocket science. So a lot of you before, when explaining that Christ wasn't on the scene for the Gentiles, a lot of you are bringing me all the way up to the book of Romans and Galatians and Ephesians. What, that don't have anything to do with Christ. That's after Christ. Your chronology is incorrect. If you're telling me scriptures in Paul's letters or his epistles, then okay. But I'm talking about Christ, and you bringing me to Romans. That doesn't make any sense. That's not correct chronology. That's not chronologically correct. So now we have the proper understanding, and you have the proper timeline of the Gentiles. So hopefully everyone's been edified, and you've been taking notes, and you review the notes and go over the scriptures and read for yourself. It's not anything hard to find out. It's very simple, and it's very easy to be understood for those that have an ear. See, that's the thing. Many of you out there can read. Everyone can read. But does your spirit allow you to get the correct understanding? That's the problem. Or do you have an agenda in the back of your mind? See, but most of the Gentiles out there have an agenda. Their agenda is to get rid of God's people and to graft themselves in and put the children of Israel beneath them and put them above the children of Israel, so now they can become God's people. But that's not the way it works, which is on the next lesson. We're going to go into the Gentiles being cut off, because you're going to find out that the majority of the Gentiles are going to get cut off from being grafted in. So with that, hopefully the Most High has opened your spirit and giving you the ability to understand. So with that, until next time, I'm Brother Yerushalayim, and I say Shalom.